Hello, everyone. Welcome to our session from Oversight to Overlooked Ethics in AI Governance. My name is Tayyaba Iftikhar, and I work at the intersection of digital policy, governance, and technology. And this is a conversation I've been genuinely looking forward to for a couple of months now. Today also marks the final day of APrIGF 2025, and it feels fitting that we're closing with one of the most pressing governance challenges of our time, um, how how to ensure that AI innovation is unfolding in a way that is ethical, transparent, and human centered. We have with us two very brilliant speakers today, Supriya Kulkarni, founder of the Ethics Company, and Dr. Shyam Krishna, research leader at RAND Europe. Unfortunately, our third speaker, Yasmin Al-Dori, could not join us today since she was feeling a bit under the weather. We will incorporate some of her insights into our discussion to capture her perspective on regional AI governance. So, before we dive in, it'll be great if the speakers can briefly tell us more about themselves and their work. Let's start with Supriya first, and then we'll go to Dr. Krishna. So, over to you, Supriya.
Thanks, Tayyaba. Thanks for inviting me to speak at this event today. So I'm Supriya Kulkarni. I'm from India, based in Indonesia. I hold a lot of interest in this intersection of technology, business, society, design. I try to sort of identify pain points or challenges and develop solutions that can sort of help everyone. My work in the area of ethics by design includes consulting, designing learning programs, ethics advocacy. I'm an ethical AI mentor, AI literacy advisor, and I develop ethical AI frameworks and AI literacy frameworks for educators. So yeah, that's where I am right now.
Dr. Krishna, if you could introduce yourself as well to the audience. You're on mute.
Someone has to do that in a meeting, right? Sorry. Yes, I'm. Thank you for inviting me. It's great to be here at APrIGF, and thank you, Supriya and Tayyaba as well. I'm Shyam Krishna. I'm a research leader at RAND Europe. RAND Europe is a independent, not-for-profit research institute in UK. But largely, this conversation is through my other affiliation as an expert member of AI ethics experts without borders group in UNESCO, where I spent the last year in UNESCO working across multiple countries, helping in ethics of AI recommendation implementation and helping in the national strategy, including Indonesia, incidentally, and India, and also widely in Middle East and Africa and Latin America as well. And more closely, I've also advised in Bangladesh, Vietnam, and Philippines in various aspects in my roles. I also have a larger role in engaging with the UNESCO's G20 Technology Policy Facility, Assistance Facility. And I do have some advisory capacity with the Council of Europe, which has some overlap with APAC because there is some observer states from APAC within the Council of Europe group as well. And largely, I've been working as an AI ethicist, policy governance, and safety research professional in the last 10 years or so, including my academic research in this space. And I work on skills, capacity building, and policy engagement at large, working with specific national governments and more specialized departments that would be working on this, like technology or innovation departments within the government at large. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me again.
Thank you so much. Wonderful to have you both in the panel with us today. So, I'm just going to give a rundown of how this session is going to be today. We'll start with questions for each speaker. Then we'll open the floor for audience question and answers. So, please keep your questions coming in the chat. You can also raise your hand at the end of the session. Finally, we'll close with one key takeaway from our speaker. So let's get started. I'll start with Dr. Krishna first. So governments around the world are emphasizing innovation-led growth, but that often collides with, it creates a friction with this need to uphold ethical and human rights principle in AI development. So how can governments reconcile these priorities and how do we define ethics? Ethical foresight in the context of AI governance?
Sure. Thank you. There is a largely work on foresight that comes from the risk orientation in AI, and foresight is a very key word here. One starting point would be to think about what would a definition of ethical foresight be. That it needs to anticipate human rights and more broadly on societal impacts before deployment, and think about frameworks on inclusivity and accountability that is not just principle oriented but also uh, practical and implementable. There are few international governance mechanisms that can be translated into practical approaches here, like UNESCO's recommendation, which I mentioned earlier, which has some implementations in national strategy level and engagement at that. And there is the Hudaria that's widely getting accepted beyond the Council of Europe's member states, with observer states, including in North Africa and Asia, getting involved. While these are not necessarily kind of a one-stop shop in ensuring ethics, big E ethics, there is something on small E ethics that should be more practically understood. That means what are the rights by design or ethics by design, as Supriya mentioned. I'm sure Supriya is going to be talking about that soon. And what would impact assessment tools look like? How can that be more reflexively, more practically included in at multiple levels of governance when it comes to AI and at large digital environment as well. So that means that is a framework like this understood with foresight at the level of a city council, a city or an urban area, as much as at the national or in international global level. So more so for regional focus, given we are at an APR IGF, there are clear evidence of kind of countries and member states coming together to think about it on sharing resources and sharing more relevant regional ethos. I'm thinking of, I mentioned this earlier in another summit on Indonesia and the Panchil. Uh, the idea of Panchil has quite strong resonance across APAC, across Southeast Asia. Those have been reflected in some national government, national level planning on ethics of AI. Those would be a good starting point to kind of come to the table and think about this. There are also other normative anchors that you think about. Of course, I mentioned the UNESCO work, but this is also about sharing expertise. So networks across ASEAN that could work. The WCIS network as well that could work to kind of share capacity and introduce not just a capacity building at the technical level, but also think about it at the socio-technical normative level to ensure that once the technical capacity can be introduced, on data, compute, and infrastructure, is there a parallel facility on ethical foresight and normative understanding that can be built as skills and capacity within the national framework is something that needs to be thought through. There are examples of already some of this being done in the from the Asian, South Asian perspective. My own engagement with India and Indonesia on their national strategy and their approach on safety and ethics of AI. There is clear examples. In Philippines, there is a roadmap that has come out of the back of the UNESCO's work that I advised that has a clear component that would embed ethics and human rights basis in it. And ultimately, this is not necessarily a balance between you always hear innovation and ethics as a balance. I don't think it's a balance. It really does follow each other. There is a amount of certainty that ethical foresight and ensuring normative framing for introducing these technologies provides to innovation ecosystem that businesses, technology companies, governments, and citizens can engage with this technology a bit more certain and sure of how they will reap the benefit, and the impact would be much more well understood when the technologies does land in these national settings.
Thank you so much, Dr. Krishna. I see a lot of people have joined us just now. Welcome. And I just mentioned earlier that if you have any questions for us, please leave them in the comment box, or you can raise your hand at the end of the session and ask any of our brilliant speakers. So I'm going to, I did mention that we have one speaker and they couldn't join us today, but we were able to gather her perspective alongside insights from other regional experts on the evolving AI governance landscape across the Asia Pacific. So, in context of this conversation, I think it's going to be great for everyone that we hear some of these insights. I'm going to be reading them. So, AI governance is reflecting different national priorities and regulatory approaches. Singapore is emphasizing human centric design with transparency and accountability, while China has implemented binding regulations for generative AI, including the interim measures for the management of generative AI services. Japan is leading efforts to the Hiroshima AI process, aiming to promote safe, secure, and trustworthy AI. We look at India. India is developing a risk-based AI governance framework. South Korea's AI Framework Act also adopts a risk-based approach to AI regulation, introducing specific obligations for high-impact AI systems and generative AI applications with extraterritorial reach. But right now, there is limited evidence on their real-world effectiveness, and cross-border enforcement remains a major challenge, which I will be touching upon in a moment. Dr. Krishna will be speaking about it. I have a question ready for him. So I think everybody can agree that governance must be iterative, it must be evidence-driven, and responsive to technological change and societal impact. So coming to the cross-border regulatory enforcement, Dr. Krishna, in what ways can regional and cross-border regulatory corporations strengthen accountability mechanisms, um, especially for digital platforms because they are operating across multiple jurisdictions?
Thank you. And especially the list of resources, or rather the larger programs and components of the global framework that you suggested does give you some idea. Uh, let's take Singapore, for example. There is essentially an aim for a testing framework within governance that they want as a technical anchor, alongside some larger regional moves that Singapore is trying to make with their to a certain extent they have a leadership in specific areas within AI, at least, and some earlier in digital spaces. Uh, what does a convening power for a country with that aim look like, and how that can be translated into interoperable standards, perhaps at an ASEAN or an APEC level, and how that can become more localized within each of the countries that they can engage with. I can kind of think of examples from my experience with Indonesia and Vietnam, and how they engage with a country like Singapore, that talks to specifically about the extraterritoriality, to borrow a word from what you just mentioned, on the need for understanding impact of digital systems and AI at large, because it cannot necessarily be only governed at the national level, or rather the impact understood only at the national level. It has to be governed at multiple national levels at the same time. uh, I already mentioned that there needs to be some resource sharing, some kind of across the border talent and skills development as well, where facilities from international organizations, especially in a tricky time like this, in multilateral politics that we are seeing, that more practical sharing of resources by having expertise flowing back and forth, especially within regions. UNESCO, we did try a couple of these ideas where we had Philippines and Indonesia kind of have a bilateral conversation at the level of experts by bringing in experts on AI education and literacy from Indonesia to talk in Philippines, and both of them jointly producing certain work together at Thailand event that they were participating in. This kind of talks to how facilities capacities do not necessarily have to have a uh, kind of a global center. It could be multi-hub, and I'm hoping that an example like ASEAN could kind of like bring that about. And in fact, I'm in Indonesia next week, and I'd be interested in seeing whether something like that would be a good practical next step, but for from national governments to kind of undertake. And there is also the idea that this can necessarily also be a accountability checker, that do benchmarks created, and I think I see some questions on language. Do benchmarks created in regional context, can they be translated a bit more efficiently, so they don't have to kind of like go back to a center of the Western global North, minority world basis in designing these standards? Can they be a more attuned to kind of regional requirements? So this would mean that whether benchmarks tested in perhaps Bahasa Indonesia can be translated more easily to Bahasa Malay for LLMs, which makes more sense if you can ensure that that is a clear pathway setup. It's not just at the kind of technical level; it is more at the standards and kind of skills level as well. And can there be clear peer validation from educational institutions in that region, working to support this? Can there be kind of diagnostics toolkit from the technical side, but also a policy toolkit that can work within this region? There could be more specific socio-technical approaches, like protocols for kind of cross-border services as they would eventually emerge. We may be seeing more dependence on specific technology providers now, but as the ecosystem matures, especially in the region, we would need to know what kind of redress protocols, how they would work within the region, how we could have some joint engagement that would work either as an ethical observatory, a policy observatory, and socio-technical observatory at the level of the region. and whether there can be kind of joint exercises on policy sandbox and also technical sandbox together. And I would be really happy to see if this could be solved at more at a skills level by having fellowships that or scholars that can actually work at the regional level by going back and forth. We had some of these kind conversations at the most recent UNESCO Ethics of AI Global Forum in I want to say June earlier this year. Uh, this does not go antithetical to global frameworks. This, if anything, would replicate at a different scale, at a different context, successes that we have seen, but also they will have also the same, challenges as well. So, but solutions may differ. So that's broadly what I would hope to see. There are steps in that direction, but most of them are at the guidance level. So I would like to see more implementation flowing through from the ASEAN AI guidance, for example. What would that look like when implemented in the multiple ways I've mentioned? Would be good to see going forward. So it's not just a jurisdictional issue; it is more a context issue.
Great, thank you. You touched upon multiple points and really provided some food for thought. Supriya, we're going to go towards you. I really want to talk about inclusivity. When we look at how AI policy is being shaped today, whose voices are actually driving these conversations? Are we still seeing the same dominant actors, or is that starting to shift? And more importantly, how can we make sure that historically marginalized communities or underrepresented communities, whether that's by geography or gender or socioeconomic background, are meaningfully included in shaping what ethical governance looks like in practice? And what would that inclusion even need to look like to actually make a difference? I know it's quite a long question, but I know you can, answer it perfectly.
Thanks, Tayyaba. So great question and very timely. So I think there's a very clear gap between the voices that should be shaping AI policy versus the ones that are actually shaping it. The dominating voices seem to be, those of big tech, powerful political actors, followed by experts, civil society, international organizations, of course. But the loudest voices try to sort of exert influence in AI development as well as policy through these different narratives, which I think have their own agendas. So something like AI will solve systemic problems like hunger and poverty. I think that encourages a lot of funding. Adopt AI or be left behind creates this kind of fear and fuels urgency to adopt. Regulation hinders innovation is a big one. So this kind of narrative, I think, aims to avoid or shape regulation in their own favor. And the AI is inevitable, sort of discourages any scrutiny or attempt at regulation. And while narratives do not really make policy, they can definitely sway opinions. The voices that are actually missing are those, who may be most impacted by AI systems and have little or no say, either in its development or in governance. And these are, communities, segments of society, largely from the global majority. These could be, indigenous communities, rural populations, women, youth, children, people with disabilities, people of color, migrants. So it's a long list. But I think what we need to do through forums like these, through the organizations that Shyam actually spoke about, is we need to not just bring the voices of these marginalized communities, but to ensure that their perspectives or opinions actually inform policy making and are evident in the values or the principles that underpin these frameworks. Policy making process, I think, has to evolve so that everyone can sort of provide their inputs, Now, this means taking some important actions. Everybody needs to take these actions. The biggest, I feel, is ignoring the hype that is created by powerful lobbies, challenging current power structures, the way profits of AI and benefits of AI are unequally distributed. We also need to create mechanisms for marginalized segments to really add their opinions and support or allies who are sort of willing to champion their perspectives. Now, this could also happen through something like robust public consultations, which are offline and online and more open to general public. Citizen juries, there are some nice examples that I came across. So in Ireland tried something in AI governance in healthcare, calling citizen juries, just like the US has juries for justice. Then in Taiwan, for instance, there are online government platforms where citizens can actually write in their concerns, and these are taken on board, and citizens can contribute their voices to policymaking. I think even in Australia, Aboriginal communities work with AI researchers to develop appropriate, culturally appropriate, language processing tools. And I think in the UK, there was a campaign for replacing the House of Lords with the House of Citizens, just to bring in, more general voices. So regardless of the mechanisms or the initiatives, I think what we all need to do is ensure AI is not just developed for these communities, but they have a definite say in its development as well as in its consumption. It should not just be forced on them.
Thanks, Supriya. And this brings to mind, I mean, I think that you nailed it. When we talk about AI governance, we often hear from policymakers, large technological companies, and research institutions, and they're usually the ones setting the agenda, defining what responsible AI should look like, framing the risks, and even shaping international norms. But this tends to sort of create a fairly narrow ecosystem of voices, which means that the perspective of those which are most affected by AI systems are frequently missing from the conversation. Um, I'm going to head to the next question. It's going to be pretty interesting. This is for you, Supriya. If you were to design an ideal AI regulatory framework, we all dream of doing that from scratch. What would be the three essential features or principles you would want to include for it to be ethically robust, adaptable, and innovation friendly?
Yeah, so thanks for this question. This is always an interesting exercise. So I don't think we really need to reinvent the wheel. What I would do is take learnings and insights from governance of other industries and sort of add to that. So for the ideal framework, I would actually draw a bit of inspiration from what I like to call the ecosystem of safety in reference to the automobile industry. So it's like a network that involves manufacturers, suppliers, regulators, technology providers, as well as users while interacting with their automobiles, as well as, drivers and pedestrians. There are different mechanisms like safety signs, traffic lights, driving tests, fines for speeding or jaywalking. So there's responsibility and there's accountability everywhere, distributed equally. I know that AI governance is a much more complex beast, but I'll make an attempt to say what my framework would look like. So I think I would like the framework to be based on three main principles with requirements from all stakeholders. The first is proactive ethics. Just as AI development would be guided by certain principles, the same principles can actually guide AI governance. So AI development needs to be proactively ethical, of course, align with human needs, uphold dignity, rights, and freedoms of humans. Developers should identify and show evidence of attempts to mitigate risks, as well as ongoing monitoring of systems and their impacts. Now, in case of harms or negative impacts, and the impacts are huge, not just physical, but mental, emotional, social, financial. Uh, there should be clear accountability and redress mechanisms. Harms to the environment should be minimized. The second important factor for me would be simplicity by design. So I'm not talking about 100-page documents, but maybe a very short, something that everybody can understand. So the framework should actually make it easy for developers, vendors, any stakeholders, any AI actors to sort of integrate these factors into their processes as well as products. And of course, for the non-technical folk to regulate, because policymakers are different from the actual regulators. And often there's, lots that is lost in translation. Now, since AI technologies and their usage is pretty complex and evolving, of course, it's very difficult for laws to change quickly. So some mechanisms that allow for agile governance, maybe setting up of bodies or agencies that can scrutinize on a case-by-case basis. Of course, independent oversight that is free of undue influences. And the third one would be rewards and incentives based framework. So most frameworks punish bad behavior. I'd like good behavior rewarded. So I'd love for the framework to actually provide incentives for AI actors, whether they're developers, deployers, who have you, to demonstrate and show evidence of responsible innovation or responsible and ethical design, proactively input, transparency or safety practices, and conscious mitigations of harms. So my ideal framework would actually encourage ethical practices, be easy to implement, and reward responsible innovation on the condition that it benefits everyone and ensures safety and well-being for individuals as well as society as a whole.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And it really ties together foresight, flexibility, and fairness. We covered a lot of ground, and I can already see some great questions coming in through the chat. Thank you, Aris Lacuna and Alicia Hepner, for the insightful comments. I would open the floor to the audience for some questions. Let's just answer some questions. So one of the questions is regarding Western concept of ethics. Supriya, Shyam, can you read the questions in the chat box? Okay,
Yes.
perfect. I think Emmett's question pertains more to what Supriya mentioned earlier. And I think, Supriya, you are the perfect person to answer it.
Yeah, so this is one of the I mean, when I began my work in ethics, this is one of the first things that I noticed, that everybody spoke about Western philosophical theories of ethics. Nobody really talked about, things like Ubuntu or Shintoism or Confucianism. There is a lot to sort of draw from Eastern philosophies as well. So when I created an ethics framework for the voice industry, these were some of the principles that I actually incorporated. And what do principles really mean? That you're sort of incorporating values that will be articulated through your design, because it is not just enough to have a principle-based framework. What does this principle or this value actually mean when a user is interacting with your voice assistant, for instance, or your chatbot, for instance? So when you talk of human dignity, how does that value actually gets articulated into your design, user interface or UX, or whatever you call it? Very pertinent point about most of the conversations happening, most of the material that you read being in English. And in fact, if we look at who are the people who are helping create these technologies, largely it is people from the global majority whose first language is not English. And if all ethical volumes are in English, how do they have access to all the wisdom and all these, fantastic things that are only present in English? So that was also one of the learnings that I took into my own framework, understanding that, I personally know people who are in, tier 2 towns in India who are in working with global companies to create something, and their English is not great. It's a far-fetched idea for me to expect them to understand what it means to be ethical, right? So somebody actually helping bridge this gap between what is expected, what is ethical, and how does it get translated into an actual design is something that is crucial. So I think people like myself, probably people like Shyam, do that work.
Thank you, Supriya. I think we're going to take Barkha's question, and then I see Ahmed has raised his hand, so we're going to take his question next. Barkha has written, how can AI ethics rules make room for local values like community, religion, and tradition, especially when most rules, especially related to internet world, come from Western ideas? So I think we touched upon this already, about privacy and individual rights, so how to align them with APAC region ideation. So, Priya, do you want to expand on that? And then I'll come to Dr. Krishna as well if he wants to say something in regards to this question.
Yes. So in fact, when I was sharing my framework with people from the US, because that's where it got implemented, um, the one of the things that I told them was privacy is something that a lot of people in this part of the world are hearing only in reference to, let's say, our devices and the internet. Before that, there was no such thing as privacy, right? Our cultures do not actually encourage privacy. But to people, what privacy means is very different from what privacy means when it relates to internet or AI systems. That privacy is very different. And another question that I got asked from users was, we have nothing to hide. Why should we be worried about privacy? Why should we be worried about, what data we give out? We have nothing to hide. But privacy is not that. It is not about having something to hide. It is about ensuring that you are protected. Your information is protected. So some of these concepts, while they sound easy, they are a little bit difficult to explain. And I think, like Shyam said, getting people to understand what AI means and what using AI means, that kind of foundational AI literacy is crucial, so that these concepts can then become very clear in reference to the kind of applications or tools that they might be using and the kind of information that they might be giving out.
Dr. Krishna, do you want to have a go at the question?
Yes, this, more with my, I don't know whether you can hear my cat. Apparently, she has a lot to share as well. Frankly, she's a bit confused. I'm awake at like 4 o'clock, for 5 o'clock, talking on the
She's a
on a call.
welcome participant.
Yes. Hello. Sorry. Anyway, that's about kind of like bringing in wider voices, right? So that obviously. So going slightly back to both the previous questions, I'm going to take some examples from my research, which lays the foundation for some of the policy work that I do, and Supriya kind of said the baseline well on how to think about this very well. Thank you for that. I would ask you to kind of like look at some of the approaches to data sovereignty, data justice from Aotearoa, New Zealand, especially taking into account the Maori perspective. So some of the case studies and the work that I've done in with that part of the world. So, some of the professionals from specifically out of New Zealand. Um, there is a visual culture to understanding data. There is a kind of a culture, much more ancestral slash heritage oriented idea of like engaging with, even from introducing the mihi as it's called. And pardon my pronunciation, I'm sure I'll get it wrong. These sets the basis for how it should ideally be translated and become inclusive in higher level conversations. I say higher level with an air quotes, because that's not where policy should be made. It needs to be made at the level of the community. But it gives a good example of how this could be approached. I'm sure there are a couple of people in the audience who are probably more of an expert than me in this. But the aim is to start looking at data itself differently, and not necessarily only its impact and its governance, and lay the basis for how community could engage with something as basic as collection of data in kind of design of forms of engaging with data differently. So visual cultures, oral cultures, kind of designing with community in mind, designing with the community, crop production initiatives, all of that would be useful to develop on design of the system, but also the policy design. So yes, citizen juries, citizen panels are a good example. Another example would be kind of including the various age groups and various kind of people, vulnerable group population. Youth panels are getting a good traction in designing solutions and policy for children. Some of my colleagues from Alan Turing Institute in the UK have done good work. I myself am working on some of this at the European level, but it is getting traction more in other regions. Tanzania, for example, where I was working, that we had a showcase of what would our agricultural solution look like if it came from high schoolers. And it opens up the conversation. It just breaks open the conversation, and then it's a viewpoint I'm sure many of us wouldn't have. And rightly said, Supriya, that it needs to be essentially decentered. I would suggest people to look at these resources on children and social justice in AI, and also data justice in AI. These are areas that me and some of the other researchers that I know have worked with very good case studies and examples out there, and they would probably give some more practical solutions for some of the practitioners and researchers here to look at.
You're on mute, Tayyaba.
Oops. Okay, I'm gonna start again. So Emmett, go for it. I see you've raised your hand, so we're very eager to hear your question.
Hello, thank you, Tayyaba, for giving me the opportunity. I just had a question. I think we've touched at it tangentially from various perspectives in the conversation today. But if we were to boil it down, and this question is posed towards both our panelists for today, from your perspective, what is a significant ethical gap in the current AI governance approaches in APAC region and perhaps even globally? Is it perhaps a lack of enforcement, missing protections for marginalized groups, or is it something else entirely? As a key takeaway from this conversation, I just wanted to see in the eyes, in the view and experience of our panelists, what is a significant ethical gap in the current practices which are followed? Thanks so much.
Dr. Krishna, you want to go first?
Sure. A significant ethical gap, and it would be too presumptuous to kind of like say that there is a clear answer here. Let me be honest. There is more a practical answer that we are right now in what would be the research phase after the proposal was put in. If this was a larger research process, we need we are in the evidence building phase. The right intent is set in multiple national contexts, as you know, as I mentioned in my earlier intervention. But what that would translate into actual evidence building to understand the level of spread of awareness, for example, for ethical AI among technical communities, the foresight that's required from policy and civil, civil servants alike, policymakers and civil servants alike, the kind of push for accountability, transparency, and participation that we can see from civil society. All of that conceptually is understood, but we are not yet seeing the evidence. So I think the big lacuna, the big void right now is funding these activities. Clear research into addressing this locally, contextually, ergo answering some of the questions about the community and the contextualization that we were discussing earlier. Clear funding towards kind of participative policy making, participative governance, and beyond just like online consultancies. That is one practical gap that I do see. And then providing for civil societies to kind of like bolster each other. There is some of what we have seen has been true since since the introduction of even before internet, since the introduction of computers, computers, internet, smartphones, they all had a very similar trajectory in kind of leaving out certain groups behind. AI is no different. So there is quite a lot of understanding of how to resolve the problem that we currently face. 20, 30, 50 years in the making. We just need to start listening to them quite effectively. That is more a practical gap as well. And how can we bring that contextual understanding together to resolve this? For example, citizen juries, participation, this has been done effectively and not so effectively in multiple different ways. We need to learn from that and see that we don't repeat the same mistake. So it's really a wave of technology that more than completely new formulation really when it comes to AI. So what we try to resolve with data and digital can be resolved with AI if we kind of like bolster capacity across these multiple constituencies in a specific community.
Supriya, if you would like to answer the same question.
Sorry, could you repeat the question, Tayyaba?
Oh, so basically the question was with regards to, wait, I wrote it down. So basically the question was regarding the perspective of a significant ethical gap in the current AI governance approaches residing in the APAC region and even globally. Ahmed mentioned that whether it could be a lack of enforcement, it could be missing protections for marginalized groups, or even something else entirely. Could you, expand on a significant ethical gap in the current AI governance framework and approaches?
Yes. So I think currently most of the governance approaches are they are not binding approaches. A large part of it is self-regulation, soft law, guideline-based, standards-based, pro-innovation in the case of many countries. There is, while there is talk of ethics principles, what those principles really mean and how they can be granularly incorporated and implemented, I feel is not clear to everyone. Ethics to a large extent is still seen as compliance. However, it is not compliance at all. Um, so this gap, I think, exists not just in the frameworks, but in the understandings of how these frameworks need to be implemented. Another thing, like I mentioned in my ideal framework, is why should companies or organization comply? Yeah, what are the incentives? It's become far easier to do whatever people want and get away with it, as we've seen in some of the big tech examples. So what are the incentives for organizations, for tech organizations, or for deployers to actually stick with the principles, to implement those principles which are already there existing in some of these guidelines? So these kind of factors, I think, are something that policymakers and regulators can probably think about.
Thanks for answering the question, Supriya, and hope Ahmed has received the answer to his question. I see a very interesting comment in the chat box. Thank you, Maria Luisa. I hope I pronounced your name correct. For the very interesting comment. We don't have much time left, so I'm going to wrap up the audience Q&A. But I would love to invite our speakers for a final thought. I'm going to give you a question, and it would be great if you could, reply to the question in a minute or two, because that's all that we have left. What is the most urgent action we must take today to align AI governance with ethical foresight? So we'll go with Supriya first and then Dr. Krishna.
Yeah, so I would actually like to answer this question with a very impactful quote by Mike Montero. So he's written a book called Ruined by Design. And he says, we need to value the consequences of our actions more than the cleverness of our ideas. And what it means basically is reframe the fast innovation narrative, take time to weigh consequences. So basically, I feel effective AI governance has to place, importance on responsible outcomes, real world impact, and ethical responsibility over just technical safety, checkbox compliance, or innovative narratives.
Dr. Krishna, over to you.
Thank you. And kind of summing up, it is the move from principle to practice. I think all three of us, and then some of the questions as well, we've been discussing essentially that the trajectory has to be now going from principle to practice, and understanding and identifying and jointly acknowledging what are the factors that would ensure this practice to play out effectively. So that means that acknowledging that it's not about ethical foresight. AI governance is not about predicting a risk-free future, because that essentially is impossible, but coming up with clarity that these are the risks, these are the ethical pathways to address them, and start kind of bolstering through investment, through education, through capacity building, through mechanisms that would allow for ideas to emerge from the community themselves. Those are the immediate next step. For all of that, we need to start the process of acknowledging that that's the phase we are in currently in the ethical pathway towards AI.
Thank you so much to both of you. So essentially, governing AI is about reimagining the relationship between technology, people, and power. The path, in my opinion, seems to be paved with good intentions, but often fraught with poor implementation. So our challenge is to build governance that is as dynamic, intelligent, ethical as the technology it is seeking to guide. Thank you very much to Dr. Krishna and Supriya for sharing your insights. Thank you to the audience for being amazing with the comments and with the questions, and for joining us today at APrIGF 2025. Enjoy the rest of the event. Hope to keep this conversation going beyond today's session. Just one last request. Christine, can we have a group photo with the speakers and all the participants and the audience member?
Okay, I think we're good.
Thanks, Christine. And thank you, everybody. Goodbye and have a great day.